Welcome to the Radiology Vault, an open repository for radiology educational content designed for learners and medical professionals. Presented by the Michigan Medicine Department of Radiology.
Peripheral nerve imaging and introduction. In the context of imaging of peripheral nerve, one must remember that neuromorphology does not always equal nerve function. Evaluation of peripheral neuropathy has been likened to a three-legged stool supported by clinical evaluation as well as functional studies, in addition to anatomic imaging. The structural and functional unit of the peripheral nerve is the fascicle. Axons are enveloped by the thin supporting layer, the endoneurium. A group of axons and their endoneurium form a fascicle. A fascicle is surrounded by a thick cellular layer, the perineurium, which provides axonal protection, and nerve fascicles are further enveloped by and protected by fibroadipose tissue, the perineurium. Here is a short axis ultrasound of the ulnar nerve at the elbow. The hypoechoic structures are the fascicles. The echogenic bright components here are the epineurium and perineurium. The number of fascicles within a peripheral nerve varies. It could be 1 to 3 in smaller sensory nerves and almost 200 fascicles in larger nerves. Short axis ultrasound of the ulnar and medial nerve, you can see the difference in the number of fascicles between these two nerves. The cross-sectional appearance of a multifascicular peripheral nerve on imaging has been likened to a honeycomb with these hypoechoic fascicles and the echogenic connective tissue, epineurium and perineurium. On long-axis imaging of a peripheral nerve, there's a multifascicular structure, hypoechoic fascicles with echogenic epineurium. And the same can be appreciated on MRI. Here's an axial T1 and T2 fat set of the sciatic nerve and corresponding coronal T1 weighted image of the sciatic nerve. And we can appreciate the intermediate T1, intermediate bright T2 fascicles surrounded by this fatty fibroadipose tissue, the epineurium here. On coronal sequences, we can also appreciate the intervening fat between the intermediate single fascicles, a normal appearing sciatic nerve. All peripheral nerves have a blood-nerve barrier formed by tight junctions in the endoneurial microvessels, as well as by the innermost layer of the perineurium. An exception to this rule are the dorsal root ganglia, which are permeable and therefore undergo enhancements in post-contrast studies, as you can see in this case here. How do we approach assessment of peripheral neuropathy on imaging? First and foremost, we look for changes in their morphology or appearance, be it ultrasound or MR. We look for changes in size, focal constriction, diameter changes, and these changes could be segmental, varifocal, or diffuse. In addition, we assess nerve motion, which could be normal or pathologic. We look for nerve-associated masses, which could be primary tumors, peripheral nerve sheath tumors, or secondary involvement of peripheral nerves. And we look for muscle changes, neurogenic muscle changes as well. So what do I mean? But they can also be very focal. Here's an axial T2 weighted sequence and a coronal T2 weighted sequence of the suprascapular nerve arising from the brachioplexus, and there's a focal area of increase due to a signal of the suprascapular nerve due to constriction at the level of the suprascapular notch by scarring and fibrosis. These T2 changes could also be diffuse, involving multiple nerves. Here's an example of chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, CIDP. You can see diffuse swelling and increase due to a signal of the sacral nerve roots on this axial and coronal stereo images. CIDP is an acquired autoimmune disease with progressive weakness and impaired sensory loss. The honeycomb appearance may be lost in the context of neuropathy, and here's an example. You get a normal appearing multifascicular nerve in the long axis, and in comparison, this ulnar nerve at the elbow has undergone hypoechoic changes with loss of the normal multifascicular structure in the case of the ulnar neuropathy. We also look for focal caliber changes changes in size. Here's a patient with carpal tunnel syndrome at the wrist. We see proximal to wrist on the short axis ultrasound a very swollen median nerve, and the long axis ultrasound proximal and distal. We can see proximal swelling and focal constriction of the median nerve deep to a thickened flexor retinaculum here on short axis overlying the median nerve, carpal tunnel syndrome. More of the same. Here's a patient who had undergone ulnar collateral ligament of the elbow. On long axis imaging of the ulnar nerve at the elbow along the ulnar collateral ligament graph, you can see hypoechoic changes with focal constriction in the area of echogenic changes, swelling proximal distal to the area of constriction. The echogenic changes are scarring related to the UCL reconstruction. The hypoechoic swelling on both sides of this area of constriction is thought to be due to damming of exoplasmic flow or exoplasmic transport causing this appearance. As I mentioned before, enhancement in a peripheral nerve is abnormal because it indicates injury to the blood-nerve barrier. Axial T2 sequence and axial T1 post-contrast sequence shows bright T2 single fascicles which undergo enhancement. This is abnormal. The same holds true for ultrasound. If we see increased vascularity within a nerve, as in this median nerve in a patient with carpal tunnel syndrome, that is abnormal. Nerve motion. Gliding of the nerve during movement of the extremity is normal, and that's allowed by loose adventitia of the mesenterium. And here we can see the median nerve in the short axis, ultrasound snapping over the flexor tendons. That is normal gliding motion. Now, this gliding motion may be limited by scarring or tethering of the nerves by other structures. This can cause nerve kinking and nerve torsion, where the nerve rotates around itself. Here's another example of a pathologic, and this time pathologic motion of the ulnar nerve. We're scanning over the medial epicondyle. And what we're going to see with elbow flexion extension is the ulnar nerve snapping over the epicondyle. That is ulnar nerve dislocation abnormal, and this could be accompanied by pain and other symptoms. We also assess the nerves for masses, and in this case we can see the median nerve in the arm. And while the honeycomb appearance of that median nerve is preserved, the fascicles are swollen and a little more echogenic, and there is an extraneural soft tissue mass with extensive hyperemia surrounding it. And this is an example of neurolymphomatosis. Basically, it's invasion of the peripheral nerves and cranial nerves by typically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There is tumor cell infiltration of both the endoneurium and perineurium and extraneural extension of this mass in this case. And this could be a primary involvement of the nerve, but typically it is a secondary involvement from systemic disease, and the prognosis is grim. We also look at muscle changes, neurogenic muscle changes, as part of the nerve evaluation. First and foremost, to diagnose peripheral neuropathy, but also to try to identify and localize the involved nerve based on the involved muscle groups. Here's a sagittal image, P2 weighted, of the shoulder, and we can see ill-defined homogeneous edema involving multiple muscles, typical of neurogenic changes. Muscle edema following the innervation can occur typically 2 to 4 weeks from the innervation, but sometimes it can occur even earlier, even 2 to 4 days after the innervation. The mechanism is not really understood, probably relates to shifting of water from intracellular to extracellular spaces. Now, based on the involved muscles, we can surmise which nerves are involved. So which muscles we have here? We have the supraspinatus and infraspinatus muscles here. And we also have the deltoid muscles. So we know that there's probably involvement of the suprascapular nerve and the axillary nerve in this patient with Parsonage-Turner syndrome. In the subacute and chronic phases, we will also see progressive fatty infiltration of the muscles, as seen here on the sagittal T1 sequence of the shoulder. So fatty infiltration of the a supraspinatus muscle and to a lesser extent of the infraspinatus muscle, suggesting of subacute suprascapular neuropathy. So in summary, you have to remember that larger nerves are typically multifascicular and may have a honeycomb appearance on cross-sectional imaging. Morphologic changes are variable and may accompany neuropathy. Motion of the nerves could be both normal and abnormal, and we use dynamic ultrasound to diagnose this. Neurogenic muscle changes are part of what we seek to look at when we try to assess the peripheral nerves. And finally, you have to remember multidisciplinary effort is key, working with your surgeon, working with your neurologist. Thank you.